The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the ballroom as Lady Catherine Ashworth pressed herself against the marble pillar. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The stolen letter crinkled in her gloved hand. She had seconds before Lord Pemberton noticed it missing from his coat pocket. "Looking for somewhere to hide, my dear?" Catherine spun around. The deep voice belonged to a man she had never seen before. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore an evening dress that spoke of wealth and position. His dark hair was perfectly styled, but his green eyes held a dangerous glint that made her pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with her mission. "I beg your pardon." Catherine lifted her chin, every inch the proper lady her cover demanded. "You have the look of someone who needs rescuing." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of sandalwood and something else. Something wild that did not belong in London's finest drawing rooms. "Allow me to introduce myself. Marcus Blackwood, Earl of Ravenshollow." Catherine's breath caught. She knew that name. Her handler at the War Office had mentioned Blackwood as a person of interest, someone to watch, someone who might be working for the French. "Lady Catherine Ashworth," she replied with a curtsy that hid her trembling hands. The letter burned against her palm. "Ashworth." His eyes narrowed slightly. "The Duke of Wetherby's daughter. I have heard much about you. Nothing scandalous, I hope." She forced a light laugh while her mind raced. What had he heard? Did he suspect her true purpose here tonight? Marcus smiled, and it transformed his stern features completely. "On the contrary, they say you are the most virtuous lady in all of London, that you have refused every suitor who has asked for your hand. Perhaps I am simply particular about the company I keep." Catherine glanced over his shoulder. Lord Pemberton was still deep in conversation with the Foreign Secretary, his back turned to them. She needed to return the letter to his pocket before he noticed its absence. "Wise of you." Marcus moved to block her view of the room, as if he sensed her distraction. "These balls are full of men who would court a duke's daughter for her dowry alone. And you, my lord, what brings you to Lady Worthington's ball?" "The same thing that brings most men to such gatherings, the hunt for a suitable wife." Catherine's stomach dropped. She could not afford complications. Her mission was too important. Napoleon's agents were planning something that could change the course of the war, and the letter in her hand contained vital intelligence about their London network. "How romantic," she said dryly. Marcus laughed, a rich sound that drew glances from nearby guests. "Forgive me, that was crude. The truth is, I came here tonight hoping to meet someone who might surprise me, someone different from the usual crop of simpering debutantes. And have you found such a person?" His green eyes locked on hers. "I believe I have." Heat flooded Catherine's cheeks. She told herself it was the warmth of the crowded ballroom. Nothing more. She could not be attracted to a man who might be a traitor to England, even if his smile made her knees weak. "You flatter me, Lord Blackwood." "Marcus, please, and I speak only the truth." He offered his arm. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Catherine hesitated. Dancing with him would keep her from completing her mission, but refusing might seem suspicious. A duke's daughter who spurned an earl's invitation would be remembered, talked about. She could not afford that kind of attention. "One dance," she agreed, slipping her arm through his. Marcus led her onto the dance floor just as the orchestra began a waltz. His hand settled on her waist with practiced ease, and Catherine tried to ignore the way her body responded to his touch. She had been trained to use her feminine wiles when necessary, but this felt different. "Dangerous." "You dance beautifully," Marcus murmured as they swept across the polished floor. "As do you. Were you taught in London?" "Among other places." His answer was vague, and Catherine filed it away. "I have spent considerable time abroad." How exciting. Where have your travels taken you? France, before the war made it impossible. Spain, Italy. He spun her in a perfect turn that left her breathless. What of you, Lady Catherine? Have you ventured beyond England's shores? Sadly, no. My father believes foreign travel is unsuitable for unmarried ladies. A pity. You would find Paris enchanting, I think. Catherine's blood chilled. Was he testing her, trying to gauge her reaction to mention of the enemy's capital? She kept her expression neutral, though her heart pounded. Perhaps someday, when this dreadful war is over. Indeed. Marcus's grip on her hand tightened slightly. Though I wonder if you truly find it dreadful, or if you simply say what is expected of a loyal English rose. The waltz ended, but Marcus did not release her immediately. They stood frozen in the middle of the dance floor, his words hanging between them like a challenge. Catherine felt exposed, as if he could see straight through her careful facade to the secrets beneath. I find war tragic, my lord. All those young men dying far from home. She pulled free of his embrace. If that makes me naive, so be it. Not naive, compassionate. Marcus offered his arm again. Shall I escort you back to your chaperone? Catherine glanced around the ballroom. Her supposed chaperone, Mrs. Hartwell, was nowhere to be seen. She had probably slipped away for cards in the gaming room, as planned. Lord Pemberton was still occupied with his conversation, his back turned. The letter felt like fire in her glove. Mrs. Hartwell seems to have abandoned me, Catherine said with false lightness. Then I shall have to serve as your protector for the evening. Marcus's smile was warm, but something flickered in his eyes. Would you care for some air? The terrace is lovely in the moonlight. Every instinct screamed at Catherine to refuse. Being alone with Marcus Blackwood would be improper at best, dangerous at worst. But she needed time to think, to plan her next move. And if he was indeed a French agent, perhaps she could learn something useful. That would be refreshing, she agreed. Marcus led her through the crowd toward the French doors that opened onto Lady Worthington's famous rose garden. Catherine felt eyes watching them, and she knew their departure together would fuel gossip tomorrow. Lady Catherine Ashworth, the ice princess who refused all suitors, leaving a ball with the mysterious Earl of Ravenshollow. The cool night air was a relief after the stifling ballroom. Lanterns hung from the garden paths, casting everything in a romantic glow that made Catherine's mission seem like something from a dream. Surely she was not really a spy, standing in a moonlit garden with a man who might be her enemy. Better? Marcus asked, leading her down a gravel path lined with late-blooming roses. Much. Catherine breathed deeply, trying to steady her nerves. The letter crinkled softly in her glove, reminding her of her duty. These gardens are spectacular. Lady Worthington has excellent taste. Marcus stopped beside a marble fountain, its water catching the moonlight, though I confess I find the company more captivating than the setting. You are very bold, my lord.
Marcus, and yes, I am. Life is too short for false modesty or endless social games.
Catherine studied his profile in the lamplight. Strong jaw, aristocratic nose, eyes that seemed to hold secrets of their own. If he was a spy, he was a skilled one. But then, so was she. You speak as though you have learned that lesson through experience. Marcus turned to face her fully. I have lost people I cared about. The war has taught me that time is precious, that we must seize happiness when we find it. Is that what you think this is? Happiness? I think this is the beginning of something that could be. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Something extraordinary. Catherine's breath caught. She should step back, maintain proper distance. Instead, she found herself drawn to him like a moth to flame. We have only just met. Sometimes that is all it takes. One look, one conversation, one dance. Haven't you ever felt it? That spark of recognition when you meet someone who could change everything. She had never felt anything like what was happening to her now. Her training had prepared her for seduction as a tool, but this felt genuine, raw, terrifying. I should return to the ballroom, she whispered. Should you? Marcus reached up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Or should you stay here with me and discover what could happen between us? My reputation will survive one evening in a garden with a gentleman who has nothing but honorable intentions toward you. Catherine's eyes widened. Honorable intentions? Marry me. The words hung in the night air between them, shocking in their suddenness. Catherine stared at Marcus, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon. Marry me before society discovers us out here together. His green eyes were intense, serious. I know it seems mad. We have known each other for less than an hour, but I have never felt anything like this before, Catherine. This certainty, Catherine's world tilted. Marriage? To a man she had just met? A man who might be a traitor? It was impossible, insane. Her mission, her duty to England, her carefully constructed life, all of it would be destroyed. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. Marcus dropped to one knee beside the fountain, taking her gloved hand in both of his. I know I have no right to ask this of you. We are strangers, but sometimes fate moves faster than convention allows. Lord Blackwood, please. You must rise. If someone were to see, let them see. His grip on her hand tightened. Catherine and I have spent years searching for something real, something worth fighting for. The moment I saw you tonight, I knew you were that something. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. This could not be happening. She was a spy on a mission, not some lovesick debutante ready to throw her life away for a pretty speech. But looking down at Marcus kneeling before her, his face upturned in the moonlight, she felt something crack inside her chest. You know nothing about me, she protested weakly. I know you have kind eyes, but a spine of steel. I know you dance like an angel, but speak like a woman with a mind of her own. I know that when you smile, it feels like the sun coming out after a storm. Pretty words, my lord, but hardly the foundation for a marriage. Then, what would you have me say? That I have investigated your bloodline and find it acceptable? That your dowry meets my financial requirements? Would such coldness convince you where passion has not? Catherine stared down at him, her mind reeling. Everything about this situation was wrong. She should be focused on her mission, on the letter that could expose a French spy ring. Instead, she was standing in a moonlit garden, listening to a marriage proposal from a man who might be her enemy. I need time to think, she said finally. Marcus rose gracefully, though he did not release her hand. Of course, I have been presumptuous. But Catherine, if you feel even a fraction of what I do, please consider it. We could have something extraordinary together. And if I refuse, then I will respect your decision and trouble you no more. His thumb traced across her knuckles, through the silk of her glove. But I pray you will not refuse without giving us a chance. A chance. As if love were something that could be planned and scheduled like a social call. Catherine had been trained to think in terms of strategy and objectives, not feelings and romantic dreams. But standing here with Marcus, she felt the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. I should return, she said, though she made no move to leave. Of course, Marcus tucked her hand through his arm. Allow me to escort you. They walked back toward the ballroom, in comfortable silence, but Catherine's mind was chaos. She needed to complete her mission, to get the letter back to Lord Pemberton's pocket before he noticed its absence, but she also needed to process what had just happened between her and Marcus. A marriage proposal from a man she suspected of treason. The irony was not lost on her. They paused at the French doors leading back into the ballroom. Through the glass, Catherine could see the party continuing in full swing. Ladies in silk gowns swept across the dance floor with their partners, while older guests clustered around the edges, gossiping behind painted fans. "Catherine," Marcus's voice was soft, intimate. "Whatever you decide about my proposal, know that meeting you tonight has changed something in me. Something I thought was dead." She looked up at him, seeing vulnerability in his green eyes that made her chest tight. "What do you mean?" "Hope," he said simply. "I had forgotten what it felt like." Before Catherine could respond, Marcus lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Even through her gloves, she felt the warmth of his mouth, and it sent heat racing up her arm. "Until tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow? The Hartwell musicale. Surely you will be attending with Mrs. Hartwell?" Catherine nodded, not trusting her voice. Mrs. Hartwell, her fictional chaperone, was indeed expected at the musicale. It would be the perfect cover for another meeting. "Then I shall see you there." Marcus released her hand with obvious reluctance. "Sweet dreams, my lady." He melted back into the shadows of the garden, leaving Catherine alone on the terrace. She pressed her free hand to her racing heart, trying to understand what had just happened to her. In the space of an hour, her entire world had been turned upside down. She forced herself to focus on the immediate problem. The letter. She had to return it before Lord Pemberton noticed its absence. Catherine smoothed her skirts, checked that her hair was still properly arranged, and stepped back into the ballroom. The crush of bodies and conversation hit her like a wave after the quiet garden. Catherine scanned the room until she spotted Lord Pemberton near the refreshment table, his back still turned as he spoke with another gentleman. Perfect. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting compliments on her gown and deflecting questions about her absence with vague mentions of needing air. When she reached Lord Pemberton's vicinity, she waited for the right moment. A collision with a passing footman carrying champagne provided the perfect opportunity. Catherine stumbled gracefully into Lord Pemberton, steadying herself with a hand on his arm while slipping the letter back into his inside coat pocket with the other. "Oh, my lord, forgive me," she exclaimed with exactly the right amount of embarrassment. "Think nothing of it, Lady Catherine." Lord Pemberton smiled kindly as he helped steady her. "No harm done." Catherine curtsied and moved away, her heart pounding with relief. The letter was back where it belonged, and no one had noticed the theft. Her mission was complete, but as she made her way toward the exit, she could not stop thinking about Marcus Blackwood, about his proposal and the way he had looked at her in the moonlight, about the possibility that the most wonderful and terrible thing had just happened to her on the same night. The carriage ride back to her lodgings passed in a blur. Catherine stared out the window at the dark London streets, her mind churning. She had accomplished her objective, but at what cost? For the first time in her career as an agent, she had been distracted from her duty, compromised by feelings she had no business having. And tomorrow she would see Marcus again. Catherine's modest rooms in Bloomsbury were a far cry from the Duke's mansion she supposedly called home. The real Lady Catherine Ashworth was safely tucked away in a convent in Ireland, having chosen religious life over marriage. The War Office had seen an opportunity and created a perfect cover identity. But as Catherine sat at her small writing desk to compose her report, she felt like a fraud in more ways than one. She pulled off her gloves with trembling hands, revealing the plain gold ring she always wore, Her handler had told her it belonged to her real mother, a seamstress who had died when Catherine was barely walking. It was her only connection to a life that might have been normal. She dipped her quill in ink and began to write. Mission accomplished. Intelligence retrieved and returned without detection. However, I must report an unexpected complication. I have made contact with Marcus Blackwood, Earl of Ravenshollow, the subject mentioned in previous briefings. He appears to be attempting to cultivate a relationship with my cover identity. Request guidance on how to proceed. Catherine paused, her quill hovering over the paper. She should mention the marriage proposal, but something held her back, perhaps because writing it down would make it real in a way she was not ready to face. Instead, she signed the report and sealed it. Tomorrow she would pass it to her contact at the flower market in Covent Garden. Tonight, she would try to forget the way Marcus had looked at her when he asked her to marry him. But sleep would not come. Catherine lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment of their encounter. The way his eyes had crinkled when he smiled, the warmth of his hand on her waist during their waltz, the husky timbre of his voice when he called her beautiful. Was he sincere, or was it all an act? If Marcus truly was working for the French, then his pursuit of her could be professional rather than personal. The thought made her stomach clench with something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment. By morning, Catherine had made her decision. She would attend the musicale as planned and see what else she could learn about the mysterious Earl of Ravenshollow. If he was a traitor, she would expose him. If he was innocent, she could not let herself think about that possibility. Not yet. Catherine chose her outfit for the musicale with extra care. A pale blue silk that complemented her eyes, with a modest neckline that suggested virtue while still flattering her figure. If Marcus was going to be there, she wanted to look her best. For professional reasons, she told herself. The Hartwell house was smaller than Lady Worthington's mansion, but elegant in its own way. The drawing room had been arranged with chairs facing a small stage, where various guests would perform throughout the evening. Catherine arrived precisely on time, playing the role of the prompt and proper Duke's daughter. Lady Catherine. Mrs. Hartwell, an elderly widow who served as her fictional chaperone whenever needed, bustled over with obvious delight. "How lovely you look, my dear. Did you enjoy Lady Worthington's ball last evening?" "Very much," Catherine replied carefully. "The company was enlightening. I heard you danced with Lord Ravenshollow." Mrs. Hartwell's eyes sparkled with matchmaking fervour. "Such a handsome man, and so mysterious. They say he has been abroad for years." "Indeed." Catherine accepted a glass of lemonade from a passing servant. "What else do they say about Lord Ravenshollow?" "Oh, the usual gossip. That he lost someone dear to him in the war and has been travelling ever since to forget his grief. That he owns vast estates in Yorkshire but rarely visits them. That he has turned down every marriage-minded mama in London until now." "Until now?" Mrs. Hartwell leaned closer conspiratorially. "They say he has been asking questions about you, my dear. Very particular questions about your character and circumstances." Catherine's heart skipped. "What sort of question? Whether you are truly as virtuous as your reputation suggests, whether you have ever shown preference for any particular gentleman, whether your father would entertain a suit from a man of good family, but uncertain prospects." "Uncertain prospects? But he is an earl." "Yes, but titles do not always come with money these days. The war has been hard on many families." Mrs. Hartwell patted Catherine's arm. "Not that it should matter to a man truly in love, of course." Before Catherine could respond, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Good evening, Lady Catherine, Mrs. Hartwell." Catherine turned to find Marcus approaching, magnificent in evening dress. He bowed formally, but his green eyes held warmth that made her pulse quicken. "Lord Ravenshollow." Catherine curtsied, proud that her voice remained steady. "I did not expect to see you here this evening. I find myself drawn to musical gatherings of late." His smile was slight, but genuine, particularly when the company promises to be exceptional. Mrs. Hartwell tittered like a schoolgirl. "Oh, my lord, you are too kind." Catherine has been looking forward to this evening immensely. Catherine shot her supposed chaperone a warning look, but Mrs. Hartwell was already moving away to greet other guests. They were alone in the growing crowd, and Catherine felt suddenly exposed. "Have you given any thought to our conversation last evening?" Marcus asked quietly. "It has been difficult to think of anything else," Catherine admitted before she could stop herself. "And your conclusion?" Catherine looked around the drawing room, noting the other guests settling into their seats for the first performance. A young lady with an unfortunate voice was preparing to sing what would undoubtedly be a painful rendition of a popular ballad. "Perhaps we could discuss it somewhere more private," she suggested. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "If you wish, there is a small library down the hall that should be unoccupied." Catherine nodded, and they slipped out of the drawing room just as the singing began. The library was indeed empty, its shelves lined with leather-bound volumes that gleamed in the lamplight. A fire crackled in the hearth, making the room feel intimate and warm. "This is better," Marcus said, closing the door behind them. "Now we can speak freely." Catherine turned to face him, steeling herself for what had to be done. She was a spy first, a woman second. She could not let feelings cloud her judgment. "Before I give you my answer about your proposal," she began, "I must ask you something directly." "Of course." "Are you loyal to England?" The question hung between them like a sword. Marcus went very still, his green eyes sharpening to points of light. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "That is an odd question to ask a potential husband. These are odd times. The war has made patriots and traitors of unexpected people." Marcus moved closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "And you suspect me of being the latter?" Catherine's heart hammered, but she held her ground. "I suspect everyone of everything until proven otherwise. It is safer that way." "Safer?" Marcus reached out to touch her cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. "What a cold way to live, Catherine. Always suspicious, always guarded. When do you let yourself simply feel? When feeling will not get me killed." The words slipped out before Catherine could stop them, revealing more than she had intended. Marcus's eyes widened with understanding, and she saw the exact moment when everything changed between them. "You are not who you appear to be," he said softly. Catherine's training kicked in. Deny everything. Maintain the cover at all costs. But looking into Marcus's eyes, she found she could not lie to him anymore. "Are you?" she countered. They stared at each other in the firelight, both recognizing that they had reached a moment of truth. Everything that happened next would depend on who blinked first. Marcus was the one who broke the silence. "My name is Marcus Blackwood, and I am indeed the Earl of Ravenshollow. I have spent the last 3 years in Europe, but not as a pleasure traveller." He paused, weighing his words. "I work for the Crown in a capacity that requires absolute discretion." Catherine's breath caught. "You are a spy, among other things." His hand was still on her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "And you, my dear not quite Lady Catherine, are also not what you seem." "I never said I was Lady Catherine Ashworth." "No, but you have been playing the role admirably. The question is, for whom?" Catherine made her choice. In for a penny, in for a pound. For England, for the War Office. For men who believe women can be useful for more than just bearing children and managing households. Marcus smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. Thank God. I was hoping you would say that.
You were hoping? Do you think it was coincidence that we met last night? That I happened to find you hiding behind that pillar just as you were completing your mission?
Catherine's eyes widened. You were watching me. I was watching Lord Pemberton. My handler suspected he might be compromised, possibly working with French agents. I was there to observe and report. Marcus's smile turned rueful. Instead, I found myself completely distracted by a beautiful woman who moved through that ballroom like she owned it while simultaneously pickpocketing government secrets. You saw me take the letter? I saw you take something. I saw you dance with me while calculating how to return it without being caught. I saw you execute a flawless theft and replacement while making it look like an accident. Marcus's eyes glowed with admiration. It was brilliantly done. Catherine felt heat flood her cheeks. No one had ever complimented her spycraft before. Her handlers treated her skills as useful tools, nothing more. Thank you, she said quietly. You are extraordinary, Catherine. Not just beautiful, but brilliant and brave and everything I never dared hope to find. Even though I am not really a duke's daughter, especially because you are not really a duke's daughter. Marcus cupped her face in both hands now, his gaze intense. The woman I fell in love with last night was not a title or a dowry or a bloodline. She was the sharp mind behind those beautiful eyes, the courage that let her walk into danger without flinching, the heart that feels deeply even when it is not safe to do so. Catherine's breath caught. You said you fell in love. Did I? Marcus pretended to consider. Yes, I believe I did. Quite thoroughly and completely, I am afraid. That is impossible. We have known each other for barely 24 hours. Is it? Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Have you never heard of love at first sight? I have heard of lust at first sight, and infatuation, and strategic attraction designed to serve an agenda. And which of those do you think this is? Catherine stared up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. She had been trained to read people, to spot lies and manipulation, but all she saw in Marcus's eyes was sincerity and something that made her knees weak. I do not know, she whispered. Then let me show you. Marcus lowered his head and kissed her, softly at first, then with growing passion when she did not pull away. Catherine had been kissed before by targets who thought they could seduce information from her. But this was different. This was fire and tenderness and a connection that seemed to reach into her very soul. When they finally broke apart, Catherine was breathless and shaking. Does that feel like strategy to you? Marcus asked against her lips. It feels like danger, Catherine replied honestly. The best things in life usually do. Marcus rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Catherine, not because society expects it or because it would be convenient for our covers. Marry me because what we have is real and precious and worth fighting for. Catherine closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of her feelings. Everything she had been taught told her this was a mistake. Agents did not fall in love. They did not complicate missions with personal entanglements. They certainly did not marry other agents and risk compromising everything they had worked for. But when she opened her eyes and saw Marcus looking at her with such hope and love, all her training seemed less important than the way her heart was singing. Yes, she whispered. Marcus went very still. Yes? Yes, I will marry you. God help us both, but yes. Marcus swept her up in his arms and spun her around the small library, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again with such joy that Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. We are going to be so happy, he murmured against her hair. Or so dead, Catherine replied, but she was smiling as she said it. Optimist. Marcus pulled back to look at her. We will have to tell our handlers, of course. Make sure this does not interfere with our work. Of course. Catherine sobered as reality intruded. They will not be pleased. They will adjust. Good agents are too valuable to waste over something as trivial as love. Catherine hoped he was right, but she had her doubts. Her handler, Colonel Winters, was not known for his romantic sensibilities. He viewed emotions as weaknesses to be exploited in enemies and eliminated in his own people. When? She asked. When what? When do we marry? It will have to be soon if we are to avoid scandal. We have been alone together twice now, and people are beginning to talk. Marcus grinned. Let them talk. But you are right about the timing. A special license, perhaps? We could be married within the week. A week? Catherine's head spun at the thought. In 7 days, she could be Mrs. Marcus Blackwood, Countess of Ravenshollow. The girl who had grown up in the London orphanages would be married to an earl. Even if it was all based on a lie. There is something you should know, she said quietly, about who I really am. You are the woman I love. That is all I need to know. But your family, your friends, they will expect you to marry someone suitable, someone with breeding and connections. Marcus took her hands in his expression serious. Catherine, I have spent 3 years pretending to be things I am not, saying things I do not mean, befriending people I despise, all in service to England. The one thing I will not pretend about is this, is us. But the scandal when people discover the truth will be nothing compared to the scandal of letting you slip away from me. Marcus raised her hands to his lips, pressing kisses to her knuckles. Besides, who says they have to discover anything? Lady Catherine Ashworth will marry the Earl of Ravenshollow in a quiet ceremony attended by close friends. No one need know that the bride is not quite who she appears to be. Catherine stared at him. You would do that? Live a lie for the rest of our marriage? I would do anything to keep you safe and happy. Marcus's green eyes were fierce with determination. The world can believe what it likes about Lady Catherine. I will know the truth about the extraordinary woman who stole my heart. Before Catherine could respond, the library door opened and Mrs. Hartwell peered in.
Oh, there you are, my dears. I wondered where you had gone. Her eyes twinkled with delight as she took in their joined hands and intimate positioning. I do hope I am not interrupting anything important. Actually, Marcus said smoothly, you arrive at the perfect moment. I have just asked Lady Catherine to be my wife, and she has made me the happiest man in England by accepting. Mrs. Hartwell's squeal of delight could probably be heard in the drawing room where the unfortunate singing was still taking place. Oh, how wonderful, how romantic. I knew from the moment I saw you two together that you were meant for each other. She bustled into the room, her face glowing with matchmaking triumph. When is the wedding? It must be soon, of course, given the circumstances. What circumstances? Catherine asked faintly. Well, my dear, you have been alone with Lord Ravenshollow twice now in less than 24 hours. People are beginning to talk, not unkindly, you understand, but talk nonetheless. Mrs. Hartwell's expression grew serious. A hasty engagement will silence the gossips nicely. Catherine felt the trap closing around her. In trying to maintain her cover, she had created a situation that demanded exactly what Marcus wanted. Marriage, and soon, a special license. Marcus said firmly, we can be married by the end of the week. Perfect. Mrs. Hartwell clapped her hands together. I shall begin making arrangements immediately. Oh, this is so exciting. Wait until I tell Lady Worthington. She will be beside herself that her ball led to such a romantic attachment.
As Mrs. Hartwell bustled out to spread the news, Catherine sank into a chair by the fire. Everything was happening so fast. Too fast for her to think clearly about the consequences. "Second thoughts?" Marcus asked gently, settling into the chair beside hers. "Third and fourth thoughts," Catherine admitted. "This is madness, Marcus. We barely know each other. We know the important things. We know we can trust each other with our lives and our secrets. We know we work well together. We know there is something powerful between us that deserves a chance to grow. And if it does not grow, if we discover we are completely unsuited." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Then we will have tried. We will have been brave enough to reach for something extraordinary instead of settling for something safe." He turned to look at her. "Catherine, I have lived the last 3 years in the shadows, pretending to be someone else, never knowing if I would live to see another sunrise. The war has taught me that life is too short and too uncertain to waste on cowardice." "Is that what you think this is? Cowardice?" "I think fear is natural. But I also think we would both regret it for the rest of our lives if we let fear make this decision for us." Catherine knew he was right. She had spent her entire adult life being careful, calculating risks, choosing the safe path. But where had it gotten her? She was alone, with no real friends and no family who knew her true identity. She was a ghost, haunting someone else's life. Marcus was offering her a chance to be real, to be herself with someone who knew all her secrets and loved her anyway. "All right," she said quietly. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, we tell our handlers immediately. I will not begin our marriage with deception about something this important." "Agreed." "Second, if our work requires us to be apart for extended periods, we accept that without complaint." "Agreed, though I reserve the right to miss you terribly." Catherine smiled despite her nerves. "Third, if either of us is ever compromised or in danger because of this marriage, the other does whatever is necessary to complete the mission. No heroic rescue attempts." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "That is a hard condition, Catherine." "It is a necessary one. Our duty to England must come first. I understand the logic, but I cannot promise to watch you die if there is something I can do to prevent it." "Then we are at an impasse." Marcus leaned forward, taking her hands in his. "No, we are not. I will promise to be as professional as possible if such a situation arises, but I will not promise to let you sacrifice yourself unnecessarily, just as I would not expect you to watch me die if you could save me." Catherine considered this. It was not the ironclad agreement she had wanted, but it was probably the best she would get. Love, it seemed, came with complications that duty alone did not. "Very well, but we must be extremely careful. Our enemies would not hesitate to use our feelings against us. Then we will be smarter than our enemies." Marcus raised her hands to his lips. "We will be the couple no one suspects, because we hide in plain sight. The Earl and his proper countess." "Exactly." Marcus's eyes danced with mischief, "though I reserve the right to be thoroughly improper with you in private." Heat flooded Catherine's cheeks, but she found herself laughing. "I suppose that is acceptable. Generous of you." Marcus stood and offered her his arm. "Shall we return to the music hall? I believe we have given Mrs. Hartwell enough time to inform half of London about our engagement." "Oh Lord." Catherine rose and smoothed her skirts. "By tomorrow morning it will be in all the papers." "Good. Then there will be no backing out." "Are you trying to trap me, my lord?" Marcus's smile was wicked. "Absolutely, my lady, and I find I have no shame about it whatsoever." They returned to the drawing room to find the musical entertainment in full swing, and Mrs. Hartwell holding court near the refreshment table. Catherine could tell from the excited whispers and speculative glances that news of their engagement had indeed spread like wildfire. Lady Catherine. A young woman Catherine recognized as Miss Pemberton, Lord Pemberton's daughter, approached with obvious excitement. "I have just heard the most wonderful news. You are to be married." "It appears so," Catherine replied with what she hoped was appropriate happiness. "How romantic! They say Lord Ravenshollow swept you off your feet at Lady Worthington's ball. Is it true he proposed in the moonlight?" Catherine glanced at Marcus, who was trying not to laugh. "Something like that. Oh, how I envy you. To find such passion, such romance, you must be beside yourself with joy." "Indeed," Catherine managed. "Quite beside myself." The evening continued with a parade of well-wishers and curious gossips, all eager to hear details about the whirlwind romance between the mysterious Earl and the Duke's daughter. Catherine played her part with practiced skill, blushing at appropriate moments and deflecting intrusive questions with gentle humor. But as the night wore on, she became increasingly aware of Marcus beside her. The way he touched her elbow when guiding her through the crowd. The way he listened intently when she spoke, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. The way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, with such tenderness that it made her chest tight. Was this what love felt like? This constant awareness of another person, this desire to share every thought and experience with them. Catherine had always been skeptical of romantic novels and their breathless descriptions of love at first sight. But standing beside Marcus, accepting congratulations on their engagement, she began to understand what all the fuss was about. When they finally escaped the musicale, Marcus insisted on escorting her home despite her protests that it was not necessary. "We are engaged now," he pointed out as he handed her into his carriage. "It is perfectly proper for me to see you safely to your door, if you say so." Catherine settled back against the velvet cushions, suddenly exhausted. The emotional upheaval of the last 2 days was catching up with her. "Tired?" Marcus asked softly. "Overwhelmed," Catherine admitted. "This morning I was a spinster spy with nothing to my name but my wits and my duty. Tonight I am an engaged woman with a wedding to plan and a future I never imagined." Having second thoughts again, Catherine looked at him in the dim light of the carriage lanterns. His handsome face was serious, but she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. He was afraid she would change her mind. "No," she said softly. "Not second thoughts, just amazement that such things are possible." "What things?" "Happiness, love, a chance at something normal after years of living in shadows." Marcus reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "It will not always be normal. Our work will see to that. I know, but perhaps we can steal moments of normality between missions. Quiet evenings at home. Lazy Sunday mornings. Simple pleasures that other people take for granted." "I would like that very much." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I have missed having someone to share things with. The small things that make life worth living." The carriage pulled up outside Catherine's modest lodgings, and Marcus frowned as he looked out the window. "This is where you live?" "It is perfectly adequate for my needs," Catherine said defensively. "I am sure it is, but after we are married, you will live at Ravenshollow House with me. It is much grander than this, but I promise to make you comfortable there." Catherine's stomach fluttered. She had not really thought about the practical aspects of marriage, where they would live, how they would manage their separate missions, how they would explain her sudden elevation from modest gentility to countess. "Marcus, there are so many things we have not discussed. How will we explain my background to your servants, your tenants? What if someone investigates and discovers that Lady Catherine Ashworth does not exist?" We will manage those challenges as they arise. Marcus stepped down from the carriage and helped her to the street. For now, let us focus on the immediate necessities. The special license, the ceremony, the announcement to our handlers. He walked her to her door, a perfectly proper escort seeing his fiancée safely home. But when they reached the threshold, he pulled her into the shadows beside the entrance. I know this is all happening very quickly, he said quietly. If you need more time. No. Catherine surprised herself with the firmness of her response. No, I do not need more time. I need courage, which is different. You are the most courageous woman I have ever met. In matters of duty, perhaps. In matters of the heart, I am a complete coward. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. Then we will learn courage together. He kissed her goodnight, a sweet, gentle kiss that somehow conveyed more emotion than all the passionate embraces in the world. When he pulled away, Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. I love you, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Marcus went very still. What did you say? I said I love you. Catherine felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. I know it is too soon, and I know it complicates everything, but I cannot seem to help it. Catherine, Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. Do you have any idea how long I had hoped to hear you say those words? Since last night? Since the moment I saw you hiding behind that pillar, looking like a duchess and thinking like a spy. Marcus kissed her again, deeper this time. I love you too. Desperately, completely, irrevocably, even though we are both probably insane. Especially because we are both probably insane. Marcus rested his forehead against hers. Sanity is overrated. Catherine laughed, surprising herself. When had she become the sort of woman who laughed at her own foolishness? When had she stopped being afraid of looking ridiculous? Go inside, Marcus said softly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we begin planning our mad, impulsive, wonderful wedding. Tomorrow, Catherine agreed. She unlocked her door and paused on the threshold. Marcus? Yes? No matter what happens, no matter how complicated this becomes, I will never regret saying yes to you. Nor I to asking. Marcus bowed formally. The perfect gentleman. Sweet dreams, my love. Catherine watched him drive away before going inside and locking the door behind her. Her small rooms felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed while she was gone. Everything looked the same, but she was not the same woman who had left here hours ago. She was a woman in love, a woman with a future beyond the next mission, a woman who was going to be married in less than a week. Catherine sank into her chair by the cold fireplace and tried to process everything that had happened. In the space of 2 days, her entire life had been turned upside down. She had found love, accepted a marriage proposal, and committed herself to a future she had never imagined possible. And she still had to tell Colonel Winters. That sobering thought sent Catherine to her writing desk. Once again, her handler would not be pleased to hear that his best female agent was planning to marry another operative. He would see it as a complication at best, a security risk at worst. But it was done now. Catherine had made her choice, and she would live with the consequences. She dipped her quill in ink and began to write. Sir, I must inform you of a significant development that will affect my operational capacity. I have become engaged to Marcus Blackwood, Earl of Ravenshollow, whom I believe to be an agent working in a similar capacity to my own. The engagement became necessary to maintain my cover after we were observed together on multiple occasions. The wedding will take place within the week. I await your instructions on how this development affects my current and future assignments. Catherine sealed the letter and set it aside to be delivered in the morning. She had told the truth. if not the whole truth. Her engagement had become necessary for cover purposes. She simply had not mentioned that she would have accepted Marcus's proposal regardless of social expectations. Some truths were too precious to share with anyone but the person who mattered most. Catherine prepared for bed with unusual care, as if she were preparing for something momentous, which she supposed she was. Tomorrow would begin the process of becoming Mrs. Marcus Blackwood. Tonight was her last night as simply Catherine, the orphan spy with no family and no future beyond her next mission. As she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Catherine tried to imagine what her life would be like as a married woman. Would she and Marcus work together on assignments? Would they maintain separate identities for operational purposes? Would they be able to have children someday, or would their dangerous work make that impossible? So many questions, and no way to know the answers until she lived them. But for the first time in her adult life, Catherine fell asleep excited about the future instead of simply resigned to it. The morning brought a sharp knock at her door, and a boy with a message from Colonel Winters. Catherine was to report to the safe house in Cheapside immediately. No explanation, just the terse summons that meant her handler had received her letter and was not pleased. Catherine dressed carefully in her most conservative gown and made her way across London to the nondescript building that served as headquarters for her particular branch of intelligence work. The safe house looked like any other middle-class residence from the outside, but inside it was all business. Maps covered the walls, coded messages filled the filing cabinets, and the air always smelled of ink and anxiety. Colonel Winters was waiting for her in his office, his weathered face grim. A career military man who had moved into intelligence work after losing his left arm at Salamanca, he had little patience for what he saw as feminine weakness. "Sit," he said without preamble. Catherine took the chair across from his desk and folded her hands in her lap. Every inch the proper lady. It was a role that had served her well with the colonel, who preferred his female agents to be demure and biddable. "I received your report," Winters said, waving her letter in the air. "Explain." "As I stated in my communication, I have become engaged to Lord Ravenshollow. The circumstances made it necessary to maintain my cover identity." "Necessary?" Winters's voice was flat. "Or convenient?" "I beg your pardon, sir. Do not play games with me, girl. I have been in this business too long to be fooled by batting eyelashes and innocent expressions." Winters leaned forward, his pale blue eyes boring into hers. "Are you compromised?" Catherine's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "In what way, sir? Have you developed feelings for this man that will interfere with your ability to do your job?" The question hung in the air between them, like a sword. Catherine could lie, claim the engagement was purely professional, but something in Winter's expression told her he already suspected the truth. "Lord Ravenshollow and I have developed a mutual regard," she said carefully, "but I remain committed to my duties." "Mutual regard?" Winters snorted. "Is that what you call it? The reports I have received suggest something rather more intense than regard." "Reports, sir?" "You were observed, Miss Catherine, dancing, walking in gardens, disappearing into private rooms together. Behavior that suggests passion rather than mere strategy." Catherine felt her cheeks burn, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "Whatever my personal feelings, they do not compromise my professional judgment." "Do they not?" Winters stood and moved to the window, his back to her. "Tell me, if Lord Ravenshollow were revealed to be a traitor tomorrow, would you be able to eliminate him if ordered to do so?" The question hit Catherine like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to give the expected answer, then closed it again. Could she kill Marcus if duty demanded it? Even to save England? Her hesitation was answer enough. "I thought so." Winters turned back to face her, his expression disappointed but not surprised. "You are compromised, Miss Catherine. Emotionally, professionally, and operationally. Sir, I can still be useful." "As what? A liability waiting to happen?" Winters shook his head. "No. Your active service is over, effective immediately." Catherine felt the bottom drop out of her world. "Sir, please, my work with you is all I have. All I am. Is it? Or is it now secondary to your attachment to Lord Ravenshollow?" Catherine stared at him, unable to answer, because the terrible truth was that she could not imagine choosing her work over Marcus. Not anymore. There is, however, an alternative. Winters returned to his desk and pulled out a thick file. "Lord Ravenshollow is indeed one of ours, as you suspected. He has been working undercover in France and Spain for the past 3 years, gathering intelligence on Napoleon's plans." "Then why the secrecy? Why not simply tell me he was an ally?" "Because we needed to test him. And you." Winters opened the file, revealing photographs and documents. Catherine could not quite see from her angle. "There have been concerns about Ravenshollow's loyalty, reports of suspicious contacts, unexplained absences, information that seemed to reach the enemy too quickly after his reports." Catherine's blood ran cold. "You think he is a double agent?" "We think he might be. Or he might simply be the victim of a very sophisticated enemy operation designed to make him appear compromised." Winters fixed her with his pale stare. "Your engagement provides us with the perfect opportunity to find out which. You want me to spy on my fiancé. I want you to marry him, gain his complete trust, and discover whether Marcus Blackwood is a hero or a traitor." Winters closed the file with a snap. "Consider it your final assignment." Catherine felt sick. The idea of marrying Marcus under false pretenses, of lying to him about her reasons, of watching and waiting for him to betray himself, was repugnant to everything she felt for him. "And if I refuse, then you will be discharged from service immediately, your cover identity will be dissolved, and you will be left to make your own way in the world as Catherine Nobody from Noway." Winter's smile was cold. "Without Lord Ravenshollow, of course, since we would be obliged to warn him that his fiancée was no longer reliable. The trap was perfect and inescapable. Accept the assignment and betray the man she loved, or refuse and lose him anyway while destroying her own life in the process. How long do I have to decide?" Catherine asked quietly. "You have already decided. The only question is whether you admit it." Winters stood and moved to the door. "Marry him. Love him if you must. But remember that your first loyalty is to England. If Marcus Blackwood is a traitor, you will be the one to expose him." Catherine sat alone in the office for a long time after Winters left, staring at the closed file on his desk. Inside were secrets about the man she was going to marry, evidence that might prove his guilt or innocence. All she had to do was reach across the desk and look. Instead, she stood and walked out of the safe house without touching the file. Some truths were better discovered through love than suspicion. But as she made her way back to her lodgings, Catherine could not shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap of her own making. She was going to marry Marcus in 4 days, and she no longer knew if she was doing it for love or for England. Perhaps, in the end, there would be no difference. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Marcus obtained the special license with impressive speed, calling in favors from contacts Catherine could only guess at. Mrs. Hartwell threw herself into the role of wedding planner with enthusiasm that bordered on mania, insisting on everything from orange blossoms to a proper wedding breakfast, despite the hasty timing. Catherine played her part with skill born of years of practice, but she felt like an actress going through the motions. Every smile felt forced, every expression of happiness felt like a lie. The weight of Colonel Winter's assignment hung over her like a storm cloud, threatening to destroy everything she had found with Marcus. "You seem distracted, my dear," Marcus observed on the evening before their wedding. They were dining at his house, chaperoned by Mrs. Hartwell and his elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Morrison. The conversation had been light and pleasant, but Catherine knew Marcus had noticed her preoccupation. "Wedding nerves," she replied with what she hoped was a convincing smile. "I confess I never imagined myself in this situation." "Marrying a virtual stranger, you mean?" "Marrying at all." Catherine pushed food around her plate without really tasting it. "I had resigned myself to spinsterhood. And now you are having second thoughts about abandoning that fate." There was something in Marcus's voice that made Catherine look up sharply. His green eyes were watchful, alert. Did he suspect something? Had her distraction been more obvious than she thought? "Not second thoughts," she said carefully. "Just amazement that my life could change so completely in the space of a few days." "Change can be frightening," Marcus agreed, "but it can also be liberating." "Liberating?" "Freedom from old patterns, old limitations, old fears." Marcus reached across the table to cover her hand with his. "The chance to become someone new." Catherine stared down at their joined hands, fighting the urge to pull away. How could she become someone new when she was still lying about who she had been? "Marcus," she began, then stopped. What could she say? That she was betraying him even as she spoke, the words that would bind them together, that her handler suspected him of treason, that their entire marriage might be built on deception and surveillance. "What is it?" Marcus's voice was gentle, concerned. "Nothing. Just pre-wedding jitters, I suppose." But Marcus was not fooled. After dinner, he cornered her in the drawing room while Mrs. Hartwell was distracted with wedding preparations. "Catherine, what is wrong? And do not tell me it is wedding nerves. I have seen you face danger without flinching. A wedding ceremony should not reduce you to this state." Catherine looked up at him, memorizing the planes of his face, the concern in his green eyes, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. Tomorrow she would be his wife, but she would also be his watcher, his potential destroyer. "I am frightened," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of not being the woman you think I am. Of disappointing you when you discover the truth about me." Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "Catherine, I know exactly who you are. You are brave and brilliant and beautiful. You are a woman who serves her country at great personal cost. You are someone who has learned to survive in a dangerous world without losing her capacity for love. But what if there are things about me you do not know? Things that might change how you feel? Then we will face them together." Marcus's voice was firm, certain. "That is what marriage means, is it not? For better or worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, whatever secrets you think you are hiding, they cannot be worse than the ones I carry." Catherine's breath caught. What secrets? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands still framing her face. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "I told you I lost someone in the war, someone I cared about." "Yes." Her name was Elena. She was Spanish, the daughter of a partisan leader who was helping British agents move through enemy territory. Marcus's eyes grew distant with memory. "I was supposed to protect her while she guided me to a French encampment. Instead, I fell in love with her." Catherine felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy, but she pushed it aside. Marcus had a past, just as she did. It did not diminish what they had together. What happened to her? She was betrayed, captured by French agents who tortured her for information about British operations. Marcus's voice broke slightly. She died protecting secrets that could have saved hundreds of lives. Died because I was not careful enough, not smart enough, not good enough to keep her safe. Marcus, that was not your fault. Was it not? I was so besotted with her that I ignored signs of danger. I trusted people I should have suspected. I let my feelings compromise my judgment, and she paid the price. Understanding flooded through Catherine like ice water. That is why you proposed so quickly, why you want to marry before anyone can discover us. You are afraid the same thing will happen to me. I am terrified of it. Marcus pulled her closer, his voice urgent. But I am even more terrified of losing you to my own cowardice. I cannot spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had been brave enough to fight for you. Catherine felt tears burn her eyes. Here was Marcus, pouring out his heart to her, trusting her with his deepest fears and regrets, and she was preparing to betray that trust in the name of duty. What if I am not worth fighting for? She whispered. You are worth everything to me. Marcus kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips with desperate tenderness. Everything, Catherine. My life, my honor, my future. All of it belongs to you now. The words were like knives in Catherine's heart. How could she accept such devotion when she was planning to spy on him? How could she speak vows of love and loyalty when she had already chosen England over him? Marcus, if you ever discovered that I had lied to you about something important, could you forgive me? That depends on the lie and the reason for it. Marcus studied her face intently. Are you trying to tell me something? Catherine balanced on the edge of confession, torn between love and duty. She could tell him everything right now, warn him about Colonel Winter's suspicions, about the assignment she had been given. They could face the future together, as partners in truth instead of adversaries in deception. But what if he was guilty? What if her warning allowed him to escape justice and continue betraying English agents to their deaths? Could she live with herself if her love cost other people their lives? No, she said finally. No, I am just worried about disappointing you. Impossible? Marcus smiled and pulled her into his arms. You could never disappoint me, Catherine. You are perfect exactly as you are. If only that were true. The wedding dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself was celebrating the union of Marcus Blackwood and Catherine Ashworth. Catherine woke in her small lodgings for the last time, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how she had arrived at this moment. In a few hours, she would be married to a man she loved desperately and suspected of treason. She would promise to honor and obey, while planning to watch and report on his every move. She would wear white silk and orange blossoms while carrying the darkest of secrets in her heart. Mrs. Hartwell arrived early with Catherine's wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk and Belgian lace that had been hastily altered to fit. It was the most beautiful garment Catherine had ever worn, and it felt like a costume for the performance of her life. "Oh, my dear, you look absolutely radiant." Mrs. Hartwell fussed with Catherine's veil, a delicate confection of lace that had belonged to Marcus's mother. "Lord Ravenshollow is the luckiest man in England." "I hope so," Catherine murmured, studying her reflection in the small mirror. The woman looking back at her appeared calm and happy, every inch the blushing bride. Only she could see the shadows in her own eyes. The ceremony was to take place at St. George's in Hanover Square, a fashionable church that would lend credibility to their hasty marriage. A small gathering of witnesses had been assembled, mostly Marcus's friends and acquaintances who could be trusted to spread the right sort of gossip about the romantic elopement. As Catherine's carriage approached the church, she saw Marcus waiting on the steps in his finest morning dress. He looked devastating, every inch the aristocrat, but his eyes held the same nervous excitement she felt in her own chest. "Ready, my dear?" Mrs. Hartwell asked as the carriage stopped. "As ready as one can be for something like this," Catherine replied. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of organ music and candlelight. Catherine heard herself making the proper responses, felt Marcus slip his mother's ring onto her finger, watched the rector pronounce them man and wife. But it all felt unreal, like something happening to someone else. Until Marcus kissed her. The moment his lips touched hers, everything else faded away. The church, the witnesses, the weight of her assignment, none of it mattered. There was only Marcus, only love, only the promise of a future together that felt more real than anything else in her world. "I love you, Mrs. Blackwood," he whispered against her lips. "And I love you, husband," she whispered back, meaning it with every fibre of her being. The wedding breakfast was a lively affair, held at Marcus's house, now her house too. Catherine moved through the celebration as if in a dream, accepting congratulations and good wishes while trying to absorb the reality of her new situation. She was married. She was a countess. She was Catherine Blackwood now, with a husband who adored her and a future that stretched out before them full of possibility. She was also a spy assigned to destroy that future if necessary. "Penny for your thoughts," Marcus said, appearing at her elbow with a glass of champagne. "Just overwhelmed," Catherine replied, accepting the glass gratefully. "It is difficult to believe this is real." "It is real." Marcus touched his glass to hers in a private toast. "We are real. And tonight, when all these people go home, we will begin our life together properly." Heat flooded Catherine's cheeks at the implication in his words. She had not let herself think much about the physical aspects of marriage, too focused on the emotional and professional complications. But tonight she would share Marcus's bed as his wife, and the thought sent butterflies dancing in her stomach. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, noting her expression. "Terrified," Catherine admitted. "Good. I would be worried if you were too confident about such things." Marcus's smile was tender. "We will take everything slowly, I promise. There is no rush." Before Catherine could respond, Colonel Winters appeared at her shoulder like a malevolent ghost. "Lady Ravenshollow," he said with a formal bow, "my congratulations on your marriage." Catherine's blood turned to ice. What was Winters doing here? He had not been invited, and his presence could only mean trouble. "Colonel Winters," she managed, hoping her voice sounded normal. "How kind of you to come." Marcus turned at the mention of the name, his expression shifting to polite interest. "Colonel, I do not believe we have been introduced." "Colonel Winters, Lord Ravenshollow." Winters extended his hand with military precision. "An old friend of your bride's family." "Ah!" Marcus shook the offered hand, but Catherine could see weariness in his green eyes. "I do not recall Catherine mentioning you." "We are not close," Winters replied smoothly, "but I could not let such a happy occasion pass without offering my congratulations." "Very kind," Marcus said, but his tone suggested anything but gratitude for the intrusion. "Perhaps I might have a moment with the bride," Winters asked, "to offer some private words of wisdom for her new life." Catherine wanted to refuse, but she could not without causing a scene. "Of course, Marcus, would you excuse us for just a moment?" Marcus looked as if he wanted to object, but good manners prevented him from refusing. "Certainly. I shall be right here when you return." Winters led Catherine to a quiet corner of the drawing room, away from the other guests. When he spoke, his voice was low and urgent. "Your honeymoon will be brief. I am afraid we have received intelligence that suggests Lord Ravenshollow may be planning something significant in the next few weeks." "What sort of intelligence?" Catherine asked, though she dreaded the answer. communications with known French agents, payments made to suspicious contacts, travel arrangements that do not match his stated plans. Winter's pale eyes bored into hers. We need you to discover what he is planning and report back immediately. This is my wedding day, Catherine said through gritted teeth. And it may be your last if you do not take this seriously. Winters glanced around to make sure they were not overheard. There are lives at stake, Miss Catherine. British lives. If your husband is working for the enemy, how many of our people will die while you play house with him? The accusation hit its mark. Catherine had been trained to put duty above personal feelings, and the habit was too strong to break easily. What do you want me to do? Watch him, listen to his conversations, search his papers when he is not around. Find proof of his guilt or innocence. Winters pressed a small vial into her hand. And if you find proof of guilt, use this. Catherine stared down at the vial, recognizing it immediately. Poison, tasteless and undetectable. Enough to kill a man within hours while mimicking the symptoms of a sudden illness. You want me to murder my own husband? I want you to do your duty to England. Winters closed her fingers around the vial. Hide this well. Use it only if you find absolute proof of his treachery. But do not hesitate if that proof emerges. And if I find proof of his innocence, then you will have served your country well and can enjoy your marriage with a clear conscience. Winters straightened his coat and prepared to leave. But do not let sentiment cloud your judgment. Too many good agents have died because someone trusted the wrong person. He melted back into the crowd, leaving Catherine staring down at the vial in her palm. Such a small thing to hold such terrible power. She slipped it into her reticule and tried to compose herself for the rest of the celebration. But when she rejoined Marcus, he immediately noticed her distress. What did he want? Marcus asked quietly. Just to offer his congratulations and wish me well in my new life, Catherine replied, hating how easily the lies came. He upset you. He reminded me of things I would rather forget on my wedding day. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Old family friends can sometimes be more burden than blessing. Shall we forget about him and focus on celebrating our marriage? Yes, Catherine said gratefully, let us do that. But as the afternoon wore on, Catherine found herself watching Marcus with new eyes. Every conversation he had, every gesture he made, every smile he shared with their guests, all of it took on potential significance. Was he genuinely enjoying their wedding? Or was he playing a role as skillfully as she was? The terrible thing was that she could not tell the difference anymore. When the last guest finally departed, Catherine and Marcus were alone in their house for the first time as husband and wife. The silence felt different now, intimate and charged with possibility. Well, Mrs. Blackwood, Marcus said, loosening his cravat with obvious relief, we have survived our wedding day. Indeed we have. Catherine stood in the center of the drawing room, suddenly unsure of herself. Everything felt different now that they were legally bound together. The room was the same, but she was no longer a guest here. This was her home now. Would you like some tea? Something to eat? Marcus seemed as uncertain as she felt. Mrs. Morrison left cold meats and bread in the kitchen. That sounds lovely. Catherine was grateful for the suggestion of a normal domestic activity. Anything to delay the moment when they would have to address the elephant in the room. They made their way to the kitchen together, and Catherine was charmed by the sight of Marcus, still in his wedding finery, slicing bread and arranging food on plates. It was such a normal, husband-like thing to do. You do not have to wait on me, she protested. I am quite capable of preparing a simple meal. I know you are capable of many things, Marcus replied, adding cheese and cold chicken to their plates. But tonight I want to take care of you. They ate in comfortable silence, the kitchen candlelight casting everything in a warm, golden glow. Catherine found herself relaxing for the first time all day, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with her husband pushing aside her darker thoughts. "Better?" Marcus asked, noting her improved mood. "Much better, thank you." Catherine finished her tea and set down her cup. "Marcus, about tonight." "What about it?" "I have no experience with, that is, I do not know what to expect." Marcus reached across the table to take her hand. "Catherine, I told you we would take everything slowly. I meant that, whatever happens between us tonight, it will be at your pace, according to your comfort. But surely you have expectations, desires." "Of course I do. I desire you more than I have ever desired any woman." Marcus's voice was husky with honesty. "But desire without tenderness is meaningless. I want our first time together to be beautiful for you, not just a duty to be endured." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at his kindness. How could Colonel Winters suspect this man of being a heartless traitor? Marcus was gentle and considerate, everything a husband should be. But then, she reflected bitterly, so was she everything a wife should be on the surface. Deception was the nature of their business. "Shall we go upstairs?" Marcus asked softly. Catherine nodded, not trusting her voice. They climbed the stairs together, Marcus's hand warm and steady on the small of her back. At the top of the landing, he paused outside what she assumed was his bedchamber. "This is our room now," he said, opening the door to reveal a spacious chamber decorated in rich blues and golds. A fire crackled in the hearth, and someone had scattered rose petals across the coverlet of the large four-poster bed. "Mrs. Morrison?" Catherine asked, touched by the romantic gesture. "I may have made a few suggestions," Marcus admitted with a smile. "Do you like it?" "It is beautiful." Catherine moved into the room, taking in the details. Fresh flowers on the mantelpiece, candles flickering throughout the space, her own belongings already unpacked and arranged alongside Marcus's. It looked like the room of a couple who had been married for years, not hours. "Your things," she began. "Mrs. Morrison took the liberty of moving them while we were celebrating downstairs. I hope you do not mind the presumption." "Not at all. It just makes everything feel so permanent." "It is permanent," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever challenges we face, whatever complications arise from our work, this is permanent. We are permanent." Catherine turned to look at him, standing silhouetted against the candlelight, her husband, her target, her heart. "I love you," she said, because it was the only truth she had left to give him. "And I love you." Marcus moved toward her slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted to. More than life itself. When he reached her, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that Catherine felt her last defenses crumble. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever truths emerged about his loyalty or hers, tonight she would be simply a woman with the man she loved. Marcus undressed her slowly, reverently, as if she were made of precious porcelain. Each kiss, each caress was a worship of her body and spirit that left Catherine breathless with wonder. She had expected wedding nights to be awkward, embarrassing affairs to be endured rather than enjoyed. Instead, she discovered passion and tenderness in equal measure. Marcus was patient and gentle, guiding her through the mysteries of physical love, with such care that Catherine found herself weeping with the beauty of it. Afterwards, they lay entwined in the candlelight, Catherine's head on Marcus's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his fingers combing through her hair. "Perfect," Catherine whispered. "I had no idea it could be like that." "Neither did I," Marcus admitted. "I have known physical pleasure before, but this was something else entirely." "What was it?" "Love made flesh." The joining of two souls as well as two bodies. Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I will never get enough of you, Catherine Blackwood. Catherine closed her eyes, memorizing the feeling of being held in her husband's arms, safe and cherished and loved. Tomorrow would bring doubts and suspicions and the terrible weight of her assignment. But tonight she would let herself believe that love was enough. The poison felt like a lead weight in her reticule across the room, a reminder of the choice she might have to make. But surrounded by Marcus's warmth and love, Catherine pushed those dark thoughts away. Tonight, she was simply a wife. Tomorrow, she would have to remember how to be a spy.